Hi guys, and welcome to another 7-minute lecture. We're looking at the news once again today, and there's been some pretty grave news that's come out of the Caribbean. I thought it would be a while before I touch on the Caribbean again, since I just did a VS Nepal video yesterday, but this news is too important to skip. The President of Haiti, Jovenel Moise, has just been assassinated, murdered a short while ago. It's all over the news, so I thought I'd give you some context to what's going on in this channel as well. As of now, the facts are quite hazy, but what we do seem to know is that armed gunmen had stormed his residence and gunned him down. So this wasn't some kind of stealthy operation like political assassinations usually are. This wasn't through the use of poisons or through the use of some hidden sniper from far away. It wasn't a time bomb. It wasn't even a suicide bomber. According to local Haitian news, it's being described as an armed commando group that stormed into his residence and gunned him down. There is now speculation that there were foreign mercenaries involved as well. The fact that it was done in such a blunt way is itself a symbol of the terrible state that Haiti's been in. Not only has the country been systematically plundered for decades by a series of bad, corrupt governments and dictators. Not only was the country devastated by a massive earthquake a decade ago, the effects of which, by the way, it still hasn't fully recovered from even a decade later. Not only were they hit by Hurricane Matthew in 2016, which once again caused so much devastation that they still haven't recovered from it. Not only have they been totally shattered by the pandemic, on top of all that, the last few months have been devastating for Haiti because of urban warfare, as in all-out war between armed criminal gangs out in the streets. I will do a separate lecture on urban security somewhere down the line, but right now what we need to know is that urban security, right, when we look at it, we typically tend to see two primary types of threats in that. We see urban terrorism and urban warfare. Urban terrorism would be acts of terror that are committed in the city. So the Charlie Hebdo attacks, the Mumbai 26/11 attacks, anything where a gunman or a group of gunmen with specific intent to commit an act of terror just goes on a rampage for some kind of political or social purpose, that's urban terrorism. Things are usually normal in these cities, and these guys exploit that peace and normalcy to commit acts of terror and massacre innocent civilians. So we see this type of terror attack in Western Europe increasing in frequency as the years progress. The other type of threat, and the one that's relevant to what's happened today, is urban warfare. Here there is no secrecy behind the violence on the streets. The belligerents are pretty openly engaged in fighting with each other. The type of fighting we've seen in, let's say, Baghdad and Mosul, where the Americans have had to take on Iraqi insurgent groups, is an example of this. Or even Mexico's ongoing campaign against drug cartels who control certain parts of the country. That's all-out urban warfare as well. And that's the type of situation we've been seeing in Haiti for a while. Even though most of the news you might see about Haiti now is about the assassination itself, if you Google Haiti and see what the coverage has been over the last 1 month or so, you will see that various armed groups have been fighting each other near the capital city, and that there's straight up gang war on the streets between them. So much so that nearly 10,000 people, most of them women and children, have had to flee the capital city as refugees because they've been trapped in a war zone over the last month. Not only is this important in terms of it being a human tragedy, it's relevant to the assassination of President Jovenel Moise as well. Firstly, according to local journalists on the spot, like let's say Widlaw Merenko, the country itself is mostly in the control of these armed gangs, and the government often patronizes, supports some of these armed gangs. You see, elections have been overdue for about 2 years in the country, and the opposition has been asking the president to step down and organize elections, which he has refused to do. So it could be that one of the armed gangs in cahoots with him turned against him because of some agreement gone wrong, Or it could be that some foreign mercenaries were hired to get him out of the picture by people who didn't like him. Regardless of who's to blame, though, the country has sort of three fundamental challenges at the moment that they need to face as a whole. The first is, of course, law and order. The interim prime minister, whom the president recently appointed, has stated that troops have been deployed on the streets to make sure that rioting and fighting doesn't break out, although how successful that would be is questionable. The second is a question of legality. There is no legal precedent for who will now take power and what happens next in a situation like this in Haiti. There's nothing in the books, so to speak. So the various political parties, state institutions, and the people themselves need to now come together to figure out what happens next. And as you all know, in a situation like that where there's no structure, the chances of reaching an actual compromise where everybody's happy are nearly zero. It will probably lead to someone being unhappy with whatever agreement is decided upon, and that then triggers a completely new cycle of violence. The third is the international consequence of this assassination. The US has not made any comment yet. They've just said that the US embassy is going to be closed and that Washington will be debriefed about this. It's important for us to note that for a long time, Moise has been backed by the US. Even though Washington has been making statements in favor of him stepping down and conducting elections, they've also been one of the reasons he's been able to stay in power for this long without having to hold elections. And this type of influence on Haiti is quite normal. Even going back to the Duvalier family, which ruled Haiti for many years, there have been dictators in the country who ruled whatever they saw in Haiti because of American support. So what will happen next? Who knows? As with what we saw on the lecture about Afghanistan a few days ago, the only certainty is that there will be large-scale violence and that this country that was already plunged in chaos is now probably on the very brink of falling into the abyss. So let's just wait and see. If you like content like this, please don't forget to share and subscribe. Thank you, take care, and I'll see you soon.